Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Lou Brown. Here are your headlines. Israel's military says it has launched the first stage of its ground offensive in Gaza City. JD Vance says Europeans will have to bear the lion's share of Ukraine's security guarantee costs. NATO military chiefs meet to discuss Ukraine and Russia. Israel is pressing ahead with plans for a full-scale assault on Gaza City, despite stalled ceasefire talks and growing warnings from world leaders about the humanitarian cost.
Israel's military says it has launched the first stage of its long-planned ground offensive to seize Gaza City, with troops already holding positions on the city's outskirts. Military spokesperson Brigadier General Efi Defrin said the army had moved into the next stage of its Gaza campaign.
In accordance with the guidance of the political leadership and after the plans were approved by the Chief of Staff, the IDF has begun the second phase of the campaign, Phase 2 of Operation.
Defense Minister Israel Katz approved the operation on Tuesday, with the plan expected to go before Israel's Security Cabinet later this week. Around 60,000 reservists will be mobilized in September to free up active duty personnel for the push. Hamas accused Israel of blocking a ceasefire deal in favor of continuing what it called a brutal war against innocent civilians. The operation comes amid warnings from international allies. French President Emmanuel Macron said Israel's Gaza City takeover plan can only lead to disaster. The International Committee of the Red Cross warned that mass displacement and intensifying strikes would worsen an already dire humanitarian crisis for Gaza's 2.1 million people. Despite mediation efforts, ceasefire talks remain stalled as Israel prepares a full-scale assault on Gaza City, where nearly 1 million Palestinians are trapped in dire conditions.
In Israel, tens of thousands have taken to the streets demanding the release of hostages held by Hamas. Among them are families of hostages waving flags, chanting and lighting candles as they call for progress in negotiations and the safe return of their loved ones still in captivity. Massive crowds took to the streets across Israel, staging nationwide protests to urge the government to reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas and ending the military offensive in Gaza. In Gaza, tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians remain without proper shelter, despite Israel saying it has eased restrictions on aid supplies. Humanitarian agencies warn delays are costing lives as families endure summer heat and brace for winter.
Rows of tents stretch across Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, makeshift homes for families displaced by nearly 2 years of war. 55-year-old Ibrahim Tabassi shows the cramped shelter he shares with 9 relatives.
Life in the tent is no life at all. There's no bathroom, nowhere to sit. We suffocate in the heat.
Most tents collapse or blow in the wind, a sign of how ill-equipped they are to shelter the hundreds of thousands of people who depend on them.
If you can't send us back to our homes, at least give us proper tents where we can live like human beings.
Aid groups say that 1.3 million Gazans lack shelter, but the United Nations says it still hasn't been able to bring in materials, despite Israel's announcement that restrictions were lifted.
How possibly this could get worse? It has already gotten worse. As you know, shelter has been banned entry for about 5 months. And in that period, over 700,000 people have been displaced or redisplaced.
For many, tents made from scraps have not been replaced since the war began. The UN warns the crisis is worsening, with repeated displacement, leaving families stranded without even the most basic cover. As night falls over Khan Yunis, aid groups say delays in delivering shelter could mean more lives lost.
US Vice President JD Vance said European nations will have to bear the lion's share of the cost for Ukraine's security guarantees. Speaking to Fox News on Wednesday, Vance underlined that President Trump expects Europe to take the lead, noting, quote, "It's their continent, their security, and they are going to have to step up." Trump has already ruled out deploying US ground troops to Ukraine, but signaled possible air support. European countries, meanwhile, have formed a coalition of the willing to commit forces for Ukraine's defense.
We're going to start with an executive order that's...
US and European military leaders held talks on post-war security guarantees for Ukraine following President Donald Trump's pledge to back protections under any peace deal. US Air Force General Alexis Grinkovich, who oversees NATO operations in Europe, briefed counterparts on Trump's recent Alaska meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump continues to push for a swift end to the war, raising concerns in Kyiv and among allies that he may accept terms favourable to Moscow. NATO military leaders gathered for a virtual meeting on Wednesday to discuss Kyiv's long-term security concerns following US President Donald Trump's meeting with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin. William Denslow reports from Brussels.
This meeting of NATO Chiefs of Defence was chaired and held by Admiral Giuseppe Dragoni, who is the chair of NATO's Military Committee. Ahead of this online virtual meeting of Chiefs of Defence, Dragoni posted on social media that this was an opportunity that, as diplomatic efforts progress, to give an update on the current security environment. A huge question for NATO is providing long-lasting security guarantees for Ukraine going forward. We have a sense of the positions from the likes of Moscow and the United States. We've heard from Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister. He has reiterated Moscow's position that a hard red line for Moscow is Ukraine's membership into the NATO military alliance. He also says that Russia needs to be provided with security guarantees going forward as well. As far as the United States is concerned, and US President Donald Trump, well, he's ruled out US forces coming to Ukraine should the peace process in the future conceivably provide any kind of meaningful cessation of hostilities. So the question is, where does that leave other members of NATO, and what kind of role could they provide when it comes to security guarantees? There are talks, of course, of a reassurance force, the likes of potentially the UK or France providing some kind of military personnel to go to Ukraine in some kind of capacity. That could mean protecting critical infrastructure, be it ports, also securing Ukraine's skies overhead as well, should this peace process conceivably take root. These are all major discussions and a major request for Kyiv going forward. They are urging their allies and NATO members to provide those lasting security guarantees to ensure that should Donald Trump's efforts to achieve a peace process start to yield fruit, to ensure that going forward Russia isn't simply able to regroup and come back at some point in the future and to continue acts of aggression or even to threaten other members of NATO or indeed the European Union that share borders with Russia as well. A huge concern for many here at NATO headquarters. William Denslow, A News, at NATO headquarters in Brussels.
Now, Poland's border region is once again facing security concerns after the latest drone incident. Villagers are voicing unease as authorities investigate whether the device was meant as a diversion.
A military drone fell and exploded in a cornfield in the eastern Polish village of Osony on Wednesday, police confirmed. Residents recalled the tense moments after the blast, which burned an area of 8 to 10 meters in diameter, but caused no injuries.
You're sitting there doing something on your computer. Your wife's practically asleep, and then boom, the house shakes. If I hadn't had the windows open, I might have been calling the glazier right now instead of talking to you.
We went out into the yard. It was dark, there were no lights. The dogs suddenly started barking.
The drone carried no warhead, contained only a small amount of explosives, and was most likely a decoy, according to the Polish news agency PAP, citing a source close to the defense ministry.
The recovered drone parts indicate the use of explosives. We are unable to determine the type of explosives, their quantity, or their composition. However, there is a very high probability, bordering on certainty, that an explosion occurred.
The incident occurred in Lublin province, near the border with Ukraine. Police had earlier reported that an unidentified object had fallen in the area. Poland has remained on high alert for such incidents since 2022, when a stray Ukrainian missile struck the village of Przewodów in the south, killing 2 people.
"17 years after the Russia-Georgia war, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze is using this symbolic anniversary to outline his government's foreign policy vision. His message: Georgia's path lies in peace, neutrality, and carefully balanced partnerships.
17 years after the Russia-Georgia war, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze is drawing a clear picture of his government's foreign policy course, one he described as guided by peace, neutrality, and a cautious approach to international alliances. Speaking on the anniversary period, Kobakidze underlined Georgia's long-standing refusal to be drawn into conflict, stressing that his government is proud to have always been on the side of peace. He said Georgia's neutral stance on the war in Ukraine had been vindicated, describing it as absolutely without alternative in order to protect the country from destabilization. According to him, while Georgia stands with the Ukrainian people, its priority is to prevent war from spreading farther into the region. At the same time, Kobakidze reaffirmed that Georgia's strategic goal remains European integration. He promised that by 2028, Georgia will have fulfilled 90% of its association agreement obligations and be fully ready for EU membership by 2030. Yet he also voiced criticism of the European Union itself, pointing to what he called worrying trends in democracy, human rights, and the economy across the bloc, adding that Georgia's accession will depend not only its own readiness, but also on Europe's internal trajectory. Turning to relations with the United States, Kobakidze called for a reset. He said Georgia wants to renew its strategic partnership with Washington from a clean slate based on a clear roadmap and mutual benefits, while criticizing current and former U.S. ambassadors for what he described as lies. The Prime Minister expressed hope that the relationship can be rebuilt in a healthy form. Altogether, Kobakidze's statements paint a foreign policy course that seeks balance, aligning with the West through EU and US partnerships, but in Georgia's own terms, while carefully maintaining neutrality in wider regional conflicts. 17 years after the 2008 war, his message is that Georgia's security lies not in confrontation, but in cautious diplomacy and strategic patience. It's Nini Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, A News.
Turkey is stepping up as a key player in efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, NATO chief Mark Rutte, and senior Turkish officials all emphasized Ankara's key role in promoting lasting peace. Our correspondent Alia Aziz brings us the details.
Turkey is moving to the center of efforts to mediate a peace agreement in the Russia-Ukraine war. In a call requested by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reviewed the latest peace track and agreed to keep close coordination with NATO on next steps, underscoring Ankara's advantage as one of NATO's most important members. Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz said Turkey will fully support initiatives aimed at lasting peace after representing Erdogan at a virtual meeting called Coalition of the Willing. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan has made major phone calls, speaking with France's Jean-Noël Barrot to assess outcomes for the recent Alaska and Washington meetings, and with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on possible steps to end the war. Those talks focused on security guarantees for Ukraine and how any settlement will be implemented. Washington signals momentum as Kiev and Moscow seem to be willing to meet. Core issues include security guarantees and territorial control. From Ankara's view, Turkey offers two key assets: proven power from Black Sea grain talks to Istanbul rounds, and regional security expertise in the Black Sea, highlighted by Erdogan and Rutte. Turkish officials also show openness to supporting monitoring or verification measures for ceasefires or post-war deals, part of broader talks about European reassurance forces and guarantees for Ukraine. Diplomats say work continues this week on parameters for potential direct talks and guarantees acceptable to Kiev, while Ankara stays connected with NATO, Washington, Paris, and Brussels. Fidan expressed Turkey's readiness to support a fair deal, and officials believe a meeting could mark a new phase for diplomacy. For now, Turkey intends to turn its relationships between Russia and Ukraine, and across the alliance, into unity for peace. For A News, this is Ali Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian visits Belarus as the two countries seek to boost bilateral ties. On Wednesday, Pezeshkian and his counterpart Alexander Lukashenko discussed cooperation on a range of areas. During the talks, Pezeshkian thanked Lukashenko for his position regarding the attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities. The Iranian president stated that these attacks were carried out in violation of all international norms and standards. The Iranian Interior Minister Eskander Momineh said both the government and parliament are determined to take necessary measures to block the shared eastern borders with Afghanistan to prevent the movement of criminals, drug trafficking, and illegal migrants. Taraj Shiralilu has more from Tehran.
Interior Minister Momineh said that Iran is determined to complete the ongoing measures to block the shared eastern border with Afghanistan in a bid to prevent cross-border movements of the narcotics smugglers, human traffickers, illegal migrants, and terrorists. During a visit to the border walls in the Taibat County in Razavi Khorasan province, which are under construction by the Iranian army, he said 130 kilometers of the walls are installed, and the complete closure will improve the security along the country's eastern border. The minister announced that the walls across Iran's border with Afghanistan and Pakistan have reduced illegal activities by 70 to 80%. Earlier, he said that more than 1 million Afghan nationals, mostly undocumented migrants, have voluntarily left Iran since 21st of March, marking the start of the Iranian year. The government has stepped up the repatriation process and is prepared for the gradual return of an additional 800,000 undocumented Afghans by end of the Iranian year on 20th of March 2026. According to the Interior Minister, there are more than 6 million Afghan nationals in Iran whose presence shall be regulated. Iran has set the 6th of September as the deadline for undocumented Afghans to voluntarily leave the country or face deportation and fines. For more than 40 years, Iran has been hosting one of the world's largest Afghan refugee populations, estimated at 7 million, who sought refuge in neighboring Iran after decades of conflict and civil war in Afghanistan. Taraj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Tragedy struck western Afghanistan Tuesday night, where at least 76 people were killed in a tragic road accident. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more.
A passenger bus carrying Afghan migrants recently repatriated from Iran collided with a truck and a motorcycle on the Herat-Islam-Kala highway. The crash caused the bus to burst into flames, leaving almost no chance for survival. Officials say 3 others were injured and rushed to local hospitals. The bus had departed from the Islam Kala border crossing after entering Afghanistan from Iran, heading toward Kabul. Herat's Information and Culture Director Ahmadullah Muttaqi confirmed the death toll and said an investigation is underway. The Afghan government expressed deep sorrow, urging transportation officials to provide accurate details and identify those responsible. The tragedy comes as Afghanistan faces a surge in deportations from Iran. Thousands of Afghans are being sent back each week. According to the UN figures, over 1.2 million Afghans have been repatriated from Iran so far this year, many of them arriving through the very same border crossing where this deadly journey began. For the families who fled hardship abroad only to meet disasters at home, this accident underscores the heavy toll of Afghanistan's migration crisis. Authorities in Herat say further details on the cause of the collision will be shared in the coming days. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio held talks with Turkmen Foreign Minister Rashid Mehmerodov in Washington. Rubio emphasized Washington's commitment to strengthening economic and trade ties with Turkmenistan, supporting regional integration through the C5+1 platform, and enhancing security across Central Asia. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan are looking to strengthen their allied ties. On 22nd of August, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev will pay an official visit to Bishkek at the invitation of President Zador Japarov.
On the 22nd of August, President of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, will pay an official visit to Kyrgyzstan at the invitation of Kyrgyz President Zador Japarov, according to the press service of Akorda. The statement notes that talks between the two heads of state will take place in the Kyrgyz capital, aimed at strengthening the strategic partnership and allied relations between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. The presidents will also take part in a session of the Supreme Interstate Council of the two countries. The visit will be accompanied by a series of events. These include the official opening of the Consulate General of Kazakhstan in Osh, the inauguration of a branch of the Gumilov Eurasian National University, the holding of Kazakh Film Days, and the Kyrgyz-Kazakh Youth Forum in Bishkek. In addition, Tokayev and Japarov will unveil the monument Golden Bridge of Friendship. For Kazakhstan, the trip carries strategic significance. Economically, the republic remains one of the largest investors in the Kyrgyz economy, having channeled more than $1 billion into the country. Bilateral trade reached almost $351 million last year, with both sides seeking to significantly increase that figure. A key area of cooperation is transport and logistics. Kazakhstan is modernizing border checkpoints and promoting the creation of a trade and logistics hub on the border, designed to speed up the flow of goods along international transit corridors. Particular attention is also given to joint management of water resources, on which the agriculture and energy sectors of both states depend. This visit continues a diplomatic tradition. Tokayev last paid an official visit to Bishkek in May 2022, while Zador Japarov visited Astana in the same capacity in the spring of 2024. In doing so, the upcoming talks and cultural initiatives go well beyond protocol. The visit underscores the allied course between the two nations and reinforces Kazakhstan's role as a key partner for Kyrgyzstan and as one of the centers of regional diplomacy in Central Asia. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
That's all your news for now. Stay tuned for A News and have a great morning.